What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. So it is episode 5 of the Panigale V4S build series. So tonight we're going to be throwing on a Superlite Sprocket quick change kit. So we're going to be saving a lot of weight. Also, it's all black, so it's going to look pretty sweet on the bike. And yeah, looking forward to throwing it on. If you're new to the channel, definitely check out the playlist in the top right of the video. So we have a bunch of episodes previously if you're checking this out just now, and also a bunch of more episodes to come. So definitely check out the playlist. Hopefully, you get some ideas on maybe some parts for your bike and some advice on some how-tos. So let's get to the job. Alright, so before we look at the sprocket kit, I just want to give a couple tips of advice and recommendations. So definitely do a chain clean. Get this thing as clean as possible. I don't know what your preferred chain cleaner is, but personally I use kerosene. If you haven't used it, it's the best chain cleaner you have not heard about. So did a nice chain clean. I didn't wax it yet because I want to wax it with the new sprocket. But the reason I'm doing this so soon is, yes, I'm still in break-in, only have 300 miles on the bike so far, but I want the chain to, I don't know, how do we say, wear in with the new sprocket as soon as possible, or else, you really should be changing your counter sprocket and your chain, let's just say if you did this at 2,000 miles or something like that. So the fact that we're doing this so early is pretty good. This chain will, set in with the new sprocket, and it's going to be black. We're going to save some weight. So let's go over to the workbench and I'll show you guys the kit. Alright guys, so excuse my messy workbench. My future sister-in-law's trying to weld a luggage rack on her DRZ 200. So this is what happens when you share a workbench, so just forgive me on that. So it's the Superlite Quick Change Sprocket kit. So not only does this save weight, but what's pretty cool about this is these bolts right here. You can undo, and it basically takes out this center portion where your cush drives go, and just swap the sprocket out. Let's say you're at the track, you want to change your gearing, so you would just undo these bolts, and then this outer sprocket part comes out. You can put a new one on, and you don't have to remove the entire hub assembly. So it's a pretty cool system. Like I said, your cush drives go in here. We do have titanium polyurethane cush drives on the way, which we're going to be putting on in a future episode, but I want to get this episode done so the chain can start working in on this new sprocket. And then we also went with the Superlite Sprocket Flange. So with this guy, we're saving about 40% from what they say on their website in weight, and I can tell you it feels pretty light. I think it's aluminum compared to steel compared to stock. So, and then we went with the Ducabike sprocket nuts in all black. So we're going to be changing up and adding some more color to the system down the road, so definitely stay tuned for that episode. And now let's get to the bike and start trying to crack that sprocket nut off. Alright, so back to the bike. Since we're going to be working on this area, we're going to have to reverse the pit bull stand to the other side of the bike so we can work on this freely. But to crack this axle nut, everyone's recommending to just leave the bike dropped and not on a stand, because it is a pain to get out. So I did buy a 25-inch breaker bar, half-inch drive. So I also have the socket set. So I really want to see if that works without having to use an impact gun. But most likely I have a feeling we're going to have to use the impact gun. So let me drop this off real quick, and then we'll grab the breaker bar and take it from there. Alright, so first we got to remove our little clip, little safety clip. So let's get this guy out. There we go. So we got our 55mm socket, and then we have our 35 for the front axle. It's a half-inch drive. I'll link to where you can find this online. This is definitely made with quality, even though I bought it on Amazon. So stick this guy on there. Fully seated. I do have the bike strapped down just in case something were to happen. And here's our 25-inch breaker bar. I doubt I'm going to be able to get it off, but I really am curious to find out. So let's see what we can do. The breaker bar did it. Wow. Alright, well, that makes things easier. Nice, we got it off. I thought it was going to be a lot more difficult than it was, but we're just going to screw it back on while we loosen the chain. So I'm going to leave it pretty loose. Get the breaker bar out of here. So to loosen your chain, we have to loosen these two bolts back here from the hub. It's actually an 8mm Allen socket that we're going to be using. So let's loosen these guys up. Not that tight. Once they're loose, they're good. Loosen this one. Alright, now there's no tension or compression on the hub itself. So we can take our chain tool, and we're going to be pulling it forward so we actually loosen the chain. So it's a little bit hard of an angle to get, but you can see these kind of ridges along the hub. And with this kind of a tool, we need to turn it this way. It actually loosens the hub and loosens the chain, which allows us to take it off and ultimately take off this entire hub assembly or sprocket piece. So I'm just taking the tool. There we go. So you're gonna have to go back and forth a bunch of times. As you can see, we're moving the wheel up with every turn. And the chain is pretty loose. It doesn't take that many turns actually. So let's take it around so we can see if we can pull the chain off right now. Alright, so now we can start unscrewing this sprocket nut right here. Sprocket axle nut. Whatever it's called, I don't know. I'm still learning all the terms. I'm going to put it face down just the way it came out. I believe there's also a spacer right here. But the chain, really we can lift up and towards the back. And now this entire assembly should really slide off. Watch out for this washer. So we're going to take the entire assembly, take this washer, flip it upside down just like it came off. And there's the stock assembly right there. So these cush drives we're actually going to be transferring over into the new Superlite sprocket set until I get my titanium polyurethane ones. These things are, I think, are steel, so they're kind of heavy, but we're going to be transferring them over. Let's see, is there anything else that we need to do? Not going to hang the chain on the actual hub itself, so I'll just put it on this little spacer. Will it hang? Yes. Alright, so let's take this guy to the workbench and we'll swap the cush drives over. Alright guys, so we're going to start taking off the bolts for the cush drives. So you can use an impact wrench, but it's basically just going to break them loose, and then they're going to start spinning and you're not going to be able to get them out unless you hold a, what is this? Let's see, 12mm Allen socket in the rear. So we cracked some of the bolts loose, so I'm going to crack the rest, and then we're going to take our 12 and then a 12.14, just hold in the front, and we're going to have to manually undo each one. So it looks like all these bolts had blue Loctite on them. Basically, just push your cush drives down from the pins. It's going to be a little tight, some of them, so I'm going to take a little end of a wrench. There we go. This one's being a little stubborn right here. But there we go. So there's the stock flange, sprocket carrier, whatever you want to call it. And here's our pesky cush drives that we need to transfer over into our new sprocket set. So we're going to give these a little wipe down. They do have a little bit of grease on them, so we're going to try to not remove that, but they got a little bit of dust with all that blue Loctite that we had to take off. So clean these up, but simply they just pull out from the assembly. And let's feel this. This thing's pretty heavy, I gotta say. We're gonna lose a lot of rotational mass, which is nice. But it's built incredibly well. I mean, Ducati did an amazing job, as always. They got their little logo right there as well. Alright, so now that we have our cush drives out, we're just going to take a little dab of grease, just kind of get it around the outside of the cush drives. We're using Bel Ray waterproof grease. Really don't put that much on here. These aren't really meant to be heavily greased, but from what I've seen, what I've read, just a little bit works. And yeah, I can definitely tell a difference in the weight immediately with this one. So from here it's pretty simple. Pretty much just take the cush drives, drop them in. Because they are greased, they're going to go in pretty easily. Right there. Right here. Remember, like I said, we are replacing these with titanium and polyurethane, and we'll save a good amount of weight from each of these all added up together. Now, just take your sprocket carrier assembly, and we're just going to line it up over the holes. Push down. And there we go. So now we're going to take our Ducabike sprocket nuts, spin them on, and then same thing that we did before. I'm not going to use the Milwaukee that we used. I'm actually going to do it by hand, but let's at least get them seated for now. So before we put these on, we are going to apply some blue Loctite to these threads real quick. And now we're just going to take the Ducabike sprocket nuts, put them on by hand, don't use a wrench. Don't want to cross thread these right away. If you feel any resistance, it's probably from the Loctite that was on there from previously. So like with this one, I'm feeling resistance. So I'm going to back it out, turn left till I hear that little snap, and then I know I'm not cross-threading. So actually the Ducabike bolts are actually a 17mm socket, which is up from a 14 from the stock setup. We're just going to bolt these down. Do a star pattern to try to get them equally compressed if you can. So this one is spinning in the back. Well, before we can put it on the bike, we need to torque these down to 32.4 foot-pounds right here. I can't get an Allen in between the hub and the sprocket assembly, so I'm going to have to do it off of the bike. But with the 12 in the rear, 12 Allen socket in the rear and the 17 up front, we'll be able to get these to torque. Alright guys, so all the sprocket nuts are torqued down to 32.4 foot-pounds of torque, and we're ready to throw it on the bike. So we're just going to lift up our chain and try to get this lined up along the splines of the rear axle. So as you can see, they are lined up. Now just take your chain, get it over the top, and the bottom should, once you push it in a little bit more, There we go. You should be able to stretch the chain over. If not, yeah, there we go. So the chain's stretched over, so we're going to make sure to put this washer back right here. And here's your sprocket axle nut, which we will be swapping out, so stay tuned for future episodes of that. Just screwing it in by hand, not going to tighten it since we need to get our chain tension correct, but just want to get the sprocket and carrier pushed back as much as possible. There we go. Now I'll just leave it a little bit loose so we can get our chain tight. Alright, so once again, this is that crazy angle that I cannot get a good shot for you guys, but we're going to take our wrench and basically pull in the opposite direction to tighten our chain. Now it doesn't take much to get this thing tight, so I did maybe, I don't know, a couple inches down and the chain really tightened up a lot already. So need to do a little bit more, check our measurement. Okay, that looks good. Still seems a little loose in my opinion, so we're just going to go a little bit more. So before we tighten up our sprocket side axle nut, we do need to torque these back down to 25.8 foot-pounds. So we got our 8mm Allen socket here, and just going to torque them. So I'm going to try to do them evenly. 25.8 should be almost there. Can move over to the second one. Now we're ready to tighten this guy up to 170 foot-pounds. I'm just going to use my breaker bar real quick to get a lot of the load on. Alright, we'll transfer over the socket to torque wrench. Now we're just going to put our little safety pin through this hole right here. Put the edge that goes in first, wrap the outside around, and it just clips over like that. And you're all set. Looks good to go. So we're going to do a quick chain wax on this. I use what is it? Maxima chain wax. That's my favorite lube. So we're going to do that real quick and then bring it up top. Alright guys, well that's going to do it for this episode of installing the Superlite Quick Change Sprocket on my Panigale V4S. So not only did we lose a lot of static weight, rotational mass, we definitely improved the looks, and we have some more stuff coming in. So like I said, we have the titanium, polyurethane, cush drives. We also have some different sprocket nuts and some different axle nuts as well. Reduce weight, also spice up the rear end a bit with some color, so stay tuned for that. I'd say it was a pretty easy job. It took a little bit longer learning all the parts, but you know, two things I really like is that I'm able to take off that axle nut without using an impact wrench, and also adjusting the chain with that little bar is super cool compared to trying to line it up with a Japanese bike and making sure that your rear wheel is in alignment. It's just, it can be a little bit of a pain, but yeah, that's pretty much gonna do it. So if you liked the video, if it was helpful to you, drop a like, drop a comment. If you have any questions or want any advice, I respond to all the comments in my videos. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. We got a lot of cool stuff coming for this bike, and we hope to see you come along with the journey. So as always, ride safe, stay safe out there, and we'll see you next time.